It's my pleasure to be able to introduce to you a man who has bombarded us with all kinds of innovative ideas and challenged us to think a little differently in so many different regards. As you know, that's of course our former speaker. In addition to that, he has shown and exhibited how you can stand up against Washington and a bunch of insiders. And we respect him for that spirit and the guts it takes sometimes to stand up. And then most of all, I'd like to introduce Newt, because he is somebody who knows how to win a majority. Newt, please join us. Thank you.
Well, let me say, first of all, it is a great honor to be out here with Todd. He has had great courage. He's had 6 terms in the U.S. House. He understands the issues. The choice here is extraordinarily clear. Senator McCaskill had the people of Missouri vote 71% against Obamacare. And less than 2 months later, as their senator, she voted for the very bill the people of Missouri had defeated by almost 3-1. Now, it seems to me as a grassroots conservative that you could hardly make a better case for why we need Todd Akin rather than Obama's senator to represent Missouri. And I think that'll be the choice. After she's done with $10 million of false advertising, hysteria, and efforts to redefine the race, this will come down to a very simple question. Do you want to keep Harry Reid as the Senate Majority Leader? Do you want to keep a firm vote for Obama and Obamacare? No. I was reminding Todd earlier, one of the virtues of being a history teacher, that his race really reminds me of Harry Truman in 1940, running for the Senate. Truman had 6 years in the Senate, and the machine, both in St. Louis and Kansas City, decided they wanted to beat Truman, told him he ought to retire. The race was over. He had no money. And Truman took 1 car and 1 driver and crisscrossed the state of Missouri and said, you have a choice. You can vote for a grassroots senator who represents you, or you can let the machines run Missouri. He won that race. 4 years later, Franklin Delano Roosevelt picked him to be vice president. And in 1948, he was so far behind that Gallup quit taking surveys in September. And that's why you have the famous picture of the Chicago Tribune saying Dewey wins, with Truman holding it up. Because that was the second time in his career he'd run an underdog campaign of telling the truth and fighting. I think Todd Akin, in the next few weeks, is going to remind every person in Missouri that this boils down to 2 very simple choices. Do you want a liberal who votes with Obama, who has proven consistently for 6 years that she is far to the left of the people of Missouri? Or do you want a grassroots conservative who wants to get the economy growing, balance the budget, pay down the debt, shrink power in Washington and return power to Missouri? It's that clear a choice. And I think it's very important that Republicans across this country understand that Todd Akin is a key to our winning control of the Senate, and that every Republican has to ask himself the question, do you really want Harry Reid back as the majority leader? Or do you want to work to elect Todd Akin and help us win control? So I think this is a very important Senate race. I do want to take 1 minute before we take questions, and I want to talk about one other item. I have not asked Todd about this, so I'm just speaking for me as a person. I was appalled and offended this morning to read the president's comments from 60 Minutes that we had had a few bumps in the road. That's his word, bumps in the road in the Middle East. The killing of a United States ambassador and 3 other Americans is not a bump in the road, Mr. President. And I think we need to have a president who understands that we are under siege from radical forces. This administration has lied to the American people for over a week. They have refused to tell the truth about Benghazi. They have refused to be open about what happened there. This was a deliberate killing by a deliberate hit team of over 100 people who arrived in 2 waves. It is exactly the opposite of what the United Nations ambassador for the United States, Ambassador Rice, said. Both the ambassador and the White House spokesperson explicitly misled the American people a week ago on Sunday and told us things that were just plain not true. The president, as recently as 2 days ago, was still saying things that are false. Nothing in Benghazi related to some stupid movie. Benghazi was part of our war with radical extremists, and it is amazing to me that not only can this president not bring himself to deal with reality about radical Islamists who seek to destroy our civilization, but he can't even have the dignity to recognize that the killing of 4 Americans, one of whom is an ambassador, is not a bump in the road. It is an American tragedy, and we should all be offended by this callousness and lack of seriousness on the part of President Obama. So we'll take questions.
We're going to take a few questions.
Mr. Speaker, what do you think are the odds that the other Republican leaders at the national level will be joining you after Tuesday?
I believe by mid-October all of them will be in. I mean, how do you go back to all the supporters of the Senate committee and say, you know, we have a real chance to defeat a Democrat in Missouri? In the last 3 polls, to the best of my knowledge, there's no poll that shows this race is impossible. In 2 of the last 3 polls, Todd Akin is ahead.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I suspect in the very near future there will be an avalanche of money from McCaskill, and it will briefly look rocky. But the underlying reality is the people of Missouri, in every survey taken in the last 2 years, have said they do not want a left-wing senator who ignores and runs over the people of Missouri. And even during the period of the maximum assault on Todd Akin, her vote wasn't going up. I'm told by people who studied the polls, his vote came down and her stayed the same. So this is a winnable race. I don't see how any national Republican in good conscience after tomorrow has any choice except to say, if the choice is the Republican nominee or Senator McCaskill, I am for the Republican nominee, and I would hope all of them would be in by mid-October.
Mr. Speaker, do you think that, do you expect some of that national money from the party and the national tax to return to this race?
Yes.
Or can you do it without?
No, I think they will return. I mean, if Todd and the people of Missouri prove it's a close race, what's the moral case for not backing the Republican nominee picked by the people of Missouri who's in a close race with an incumbent liberal Democrat? I mean, how do they go back to their donors and say, oh, I wanted to throw the Senate away and make sure that Harry Reid got to be majority leader? For what reason? Well, let me say something. Okay, I have occasionally said pretty dumb things in my career. My wife still occasionally looks at me and says, lunar colony. And I get it. But if saying something dumb disqualified you, Joe Biden couldn't be vice president.
How disappointed are you, in particular, in Mitt Romney for calling on Todd Akin to drop out of this race?
Look, a lot of people said a lot of things in the first 48 hours. My expectation would be that in the crunch, in October, Governor Romney is going to be for the entire ticket, and he's going to be for Todd Akin. And clearly Governor Romney has to carry Missouri in order to win the presidency. And when he carries Missouri, he makes it almost impossible for Claire McCaskill. I mean, how many people are going to split their ticket and have a Romney-McCaskill ticket?
No.
Okay, so I think that's why, frankly, in the end, I believe that Todd Akin is the next senator from Missouri.
All right, Mr. Congressman Akin, could I ask you a question? Please?
Yeah.
Are you absolutely, positively, immutably in this race with this deadline looming? Have you made up your mind, or have you had any waivers of doubt between what happened and now?
For the about 100th time or so, I am in this race, and And the reason I'm in the race is because the people of Missouri chose me to do a job. I take that very seriously, and we are going to be totally focused on winning that seat from Claire McCaskill, because that's what I was told to do by the Republican voters, and I plan to get that job done.
Have you flip-flopped on earmarks in order to get support and money from Jim DeMint's PAC and others?
No, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. The thing about earmarks that makes it tricky for people to follow is there's a lot of different definitions. What I am totally against is the things that are done in the dark of night. There's been no legislative approval, and there's special deals for people. I have worked on legislation to prevent that from happening. And so that's the place where everybody that I know of within our party is in total agreement. And so we're absolutely solid on that point. And the only place that there was a question is when you get into just plain amendments that have gone through subcommittees and committees and things like that, as long as those are not directed to any particular company, then those are just plain old amendments, and those are things that, as we've talked to admit, we're exactly on the same page, using the same definition, so there's been no change at all in our position, and no change in his position either.
Congressman Akin,
Yeah.
explain what you think Speaker Gingrich's participation in your campaign does, and will you welcome back some of those Republicans, if they come back, to turn their back on you?
Look, let's keep this thing clear. We don't get involved in a whole lot of little details. The point of the matter is, what is the America that we want to choose in the future? And basically the America that I want is the America we've grown up on, a place where there's jobs, where there's a lot of freedom, where Washington isn't choking everything in every aspect of our life. And basically, it seems to me, we want the America that basically nourishes freedom and the idea that we have a creator that gave us life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. That's what made us who we are. We love the American dream. And I don't think we want to go down the path of Greece with an increasingly large government, one that we can't afford, and two that's just burying us in regulations and red tape. And those are the two choices. If you take a look at my record and McCaskill, this isn't two people that you can't tell the difference between. Okay? I mean, she was the key vote to pass Obamacare. I've voted against it 30 times. Go to the Constitution. Go to the Second Amendment. I've got an A rating from the National Rifle Association. She's got an F. It's really a very, very distinct difference. And the question is, you want more freedom or more Washington?
Congressman, did you talk to DeMint? I mean, was there a conversation where he just wanted to make sure he knew what your interpretation of earmarks was, or kind of, can you walk through
that discussion's taken place at a staff level, and people talked, and okay, give us a definition. Well, this is the one we're using, and we said, well, no difference. We're on the same page.
Okay, so then did they say, well, since we are all on the same page, that DeMint will help you in the campaign?
There's been nothing official on that.
Okay.
Yeah, the conversation has been going on, but there's nothing official.
Mr.
Yeah.
Speaker, what you said about Republicans coming back on board with Todd, have you had conversations with anyone to that effect? Have you told them that they ought to, personally?
I haven't had any conversation I'm going to share with you.
Okay. Obligated to ask.
No. But I'm reasonably confident that you're going to see more and more Republicans coming on board, and see, somebody over here has already come back. So, but I think you'll see. Look, when the Farm Bureau meets and re-endorses, I mean, that's a pretty grassroots signal that in Missouri the decision's made. And I think at some point the National Party has to respect the right of the people of Missouri to pick their nominee. And I think any rational person is going to reach a conclusion that we need this Senate seat in order to be able to organize the Senate next year. So my years of experience and occasional conversations indicate to me you'll see more and more people gradually come to Todd's support, and you'll see the institutions gradually move back to Todd's support.
So what would you say to Reince Priebus, who yesterday, as late as yesterday, said that Todd Akin would not be the candidate and that another person would still emerge?
I know Reince very well. We've been friends for many years. My wife is from Wisconsin, and my son-in-law is from Wisconsin. Reince was the state chairman up there. and he knows a great deal about Wisconsin. The question for Reince is simple. If, after this week, Todd Akin is the nominee, which I believe it will be, or I wouldn't be here. If he is the nominee and he is campaigning, then as the Republican national chairman, my expectation is that the Republican victory program in Missouri will be a victory program for all the Republican candidates in Missouri. And I can't imagine that he would want to risk losing Missouri for Romney by getting into some kind of divisive, schismatic fight. So I'm confident that when you get down to the crunch, and this is, again, a number of establishment figures said, oh, if only we could talk Todd into quitting. Well, that's over. And I think at some point in the next week, you'll see people beginning to adjust to that reality.
We the people have spoken.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.